Welcome to the Laura Birthday Celebration and Remembrance featuring the Wilder Men. The Wilder Outdoor Theater now begins its 48th year, dedicated to sharing the story of Laura Ingalls Wilder during her years here on the banks of Plum Creek. In past years, we've revisited the 1978 Fragments of a Dream production, held conversations with the strong women who have played the role of Carolyn Ingalls, and interviewed the actresses who brought life to the roles of Laura, Mary, and Nasty Nellie. This year, we look at some of the men who have been instrumental both on and behind the stage. Laura Ingalls Wilder would be well over 150 years old this year, which is far less than the total number of years dedicated to the Wilder Outdoor Theater by the men who have been instrumental in the production. Today, we celebrate them and share their stories. Laura Ingalls and the Wilder Men. It also takes time now to remember the original author James Merchant and two of the founders, Augie Van De Wiele and Al Farber. I never met original author James Merchant, though I am good friends with his brother Tom, who was the newspaper editor here for many, many years. James was a local lad who created the first script, mixing Laura Ingalls with the real folks in Walnut Grove. This planted the seed for a production that grew and has drawn audiences from around the world to this tiny town on the prairie.
He was an accomplished pianist. He played trombone in high school. He got drafted during Vietnam, and he played in the Fort Monmouth band for the whole time he served. He got a job in De Smet, South Dakota. It was at the De Smet News, the newspaper there, and of course, they were already getting into Laura Ingalls Wilder thing. Things started to pick up from there. People in the community, of course, were getting interested in this and getting a museum going. And then they asked him if he would be interested in writing a play. And of course, he was editing the newspaper at the time too, and going to college at Southwest State. I think in '78, he moved to California. He took on a job at Norman Lear Tandem Productions, produced the All in the Family, One Day at a Time, and the Jeffersons. He was the property manager for that studio. He had 3,000 scenic properties that he managed. And of course, they were desperately trying to get this second half of the script, and actually it was a three-part script originally. And he had not finished. And so my dad was, of course, trying to get him to we need this thing, because they really, at that time, there was people already working on this and trying to figure out what to do. And of course, they had the first half or so of the script. I think he probably shortened it a little just to get it done, maybe. He never saw the play or the thing until the 10th anniversary.
I heard, yeah.
And at that time, Catherine McGregor was there. That's the only time he saw the play. At the end of the first act, there was a huge thunderstorm moving. It was just a deluge. He wrote a sitcom about a small town newspaper in Minnesota called Alf and Glynis, and he wrote a half-hour script for it, and they had accepted the script. They liked it, but it got lost and it got canceled.
I'm going to talk about two gentlemen who were the inspiration and the driving force to start the production of the Wilder pageant. And they're both no longer with us, although I look over my shoulder occasionally and think they are obviously still around. This is Augie Van De Wiele and Alan Farber. Augie Van De Wiele dreamed of telling the story of Laura Ingalls Wilder's childhood in Walnut Grove as a boon to the local community. He was the first chairperson of the pageant committee and worked tirelessly with many others to make Fragments of a Dream come true. Dick and Yvonne Van Hecke were there in the beginning working on sets and concession stands. And Dick said this about Augie. Augie had the leadership ability and drive to make the pageant work. Without Bill and Augie, I doubt if the pageant would have happened. Augie was able to find volunteers with the skills the pageant needed and the ability to get them to work together to get the job done. It looked to me like Marlene did a lot of the farming, so Augie had time to work on the pageant. I only remember seeing Augie lose his temper once. There was a goat involved in the pageant, and the darn thing got out. We were trying to catch this goat along the thickets near Plum Creek. It was hot and miserable, and by golly, it finally got the best of Augie. Augie was a good guy and a great friend.
Augie, the real memory of him I have is the night it stormed, and Ross Elford was directing, and we had to call it. I mean, there was lightning, and our wonderful Caroline, Deb Keel, didn't want to leave the stage, and everybody's hollering at everybody else, and we finally had to call it. And that was the night that Catherine McGregor was there, and so she never did get to do any Q&A with the audience, and the weather really followed you up. You've been through, as a director, many of those nights too, and he was just beside himself over the lightning, and the reports were coming in, and it was so we all hived up in that tech booth, the old tech booth.
Ron and Roberta Bakken rolled into the pageant grounds at the very beginning and didn't move on until 1999. Most of their time was spent behind the scenes as members of the pageant committee for 17 years, running sound, helping set crew, and doing publicity. Berta also acted for 8 years and performed with the pageant singers for 23 years. Berta fondly remembers Augie Van De Wiele. Where's Augie? Have you seen Augie? I need to talk to him. Has Augie got that done yet? Who was Augie? To those of us involved with the Wilder pageant from day one, Augie Van De Wiele was the heart and soul of the Wilder pageant and the committee involved in the production of the show. He was instrumental in obtaining the script, the construction of the site and sets, and overseeing the outdoor production on a yearly basis, sort of a jack of all trades. Augie was the leader of the pack, a group of inexperienced volunteers who provided the groundwork for a production that is still ongoing. He had a way of leading by example. He never told anyone what to do. He'd just start doing it, and before long, 2 or 3 others would be there helping finish the project. If mistakes were made, and there were many, Augie would not criticize or get upset. He would just quietly help fix the problem. Augie was a peacemaker. He was able to diffuse differences that arose between cast, crew, directors, and volunteers in a calm manner. Only an act of nature or a horse that ran away got the best of him. He handled everything like a seasoned pro. He did it with enthusiasm and optimism, looking forward to each season's production being better than the last. Augie became a good friend to us old-timers, someone we could trust and count on to get things done right. Augie was then, and still remains, the first person we think of when someone says Wilder pageant. Many talented people have been involved with the pageant over the years, all following the legacy that Augie left for them.
And I just knew him from Lions Club, and then got to know him more when we started the pageant, especially when we started building stuff outside. Augie was kind of an engineer. He kind of, between him and Al Farber, they had the ideas, and they were the ones that could put ideas together. It made it a good success the first year, even though The first 2 years, 3 years were kind of crude compared to way you're doing it now. First year out there, we hauled that old building from Orange Salls. We trucked that out there for, I think that became the Olson store. A bunch of us built a stage and stuff through that. Left the school, went outside that winter. We were out there quite a bit. The set got built even just before the first night. We still had a few odds and ends that had to get done. Oh, the railroad tracks came by much later. The first couple years we moved those sets out on 2x4s on wheels. Augie or somebody had said it'd be nice if we had some rails. And I happened to be going up by Lucan where they were tearing out the railroad, and I stopped and asked the guy if we could buy some rail. And he said, no. He said, this is all salvage. He said, I can't sell you anything. What do you need it for? And I told him, and about 2 days later, lo and behold, a couple chunks of rail got dropped off at Lad's blacksmith shop. So that made stuff easier to move. Later on, Hub Kohler put the hydraulics on it to lift up the back side of the house all the time. Whenever anybody wants to know, that's the rails that came between Milroy and Lucan. Augie did a lot. Him and Al Farber were the ones. Somebody had ideas, but those two guys always put it together. I put the first fire together. The first year we had it out there, everybody sat on hay bale. And the first night, we turned on the fire, and it came up kind of quick. And the first couple rows of people in hay bales got up and went back and bailed out. First couple years of the pageant, out there at that pageant site getting built, were probably more fun than any pageant work since.
Yeah.
Because it was just baby steps. It was the beginning for the way the good things are now.
Right.
The way the pageant is done. Most of those guys that we probably worked out there with aren't even around anymore.
Yeah.
Kurt Nelson.
Oh, Kurt Nelson, okay.
And then there was Augie and Al and Van De Wiele, I think, and
Yeah.
McLaughlin, I think, was. It was just a good community effort.
Yeah.
That bunch, starting back there in the early 70s, their groundwork made the success of what the pageant is today.
Right, right.
But Augie was the visionary, and Augie was the man who could see what the production could become. The first year that they did that in the auditorium in the Walnut Grove High School gym, it was crowded, it was very, very hot, and they were shocked at how many people showed up. And so they knew at that time that they needed to do something more because they couldn't do it inside because so many people were showing up. The show that we do is out on Al Farber's land. Al Farber, strong, direct, maybe irritating to some people because he was so forthright.
And just what do you think I do all day? Sit around at Olson's store playing cards? It's a lot of work taking care of 9 children.
But Margaret, we only have 8.
I was including you, dear.
You know, Dad was farming a little bit. He had cattle when that started. He'd get home from the mail route at 3:30, whatever, and he'd always be doing something, it seemed like. He says, I got to go down to the pageant and mow, trying to make it better. Then he had to go down and put up the pageant flag. You know, it's because of the devotion that the people had at that time. And to this day, what you guys are doing is why the pageant's still running. The site where the pageant is located was where my dad and mom wanted to build a house. So where the light booth is, that was going to be my dad's house, maybe just a little bit further to the south. You know, he talked about that from the time we were young. So, you know, he had a understanding and saw the value in the pageant, in what promoting Walnut Grove, promoting Lower Ingalls Wilder. You know, it was fun working with him. I can remember this pretty vividly. This was probably the year that we started, the very first year, in town, I should say. And my dad was working, and that was beastly hot that whole week before he opened the production and everything. And I can remember my mom and dad having a little bit of, shall I say, words. My mom was upset, and I remember the word divorce came up. Well, this is getting pretty serious here. You know, Dad is spending too much time down there or what, but the divorce never happened. Of course, my brother Brad and I worked together quite a bit on building that first set outside. And I can remember that we were borrowing anything we could get to build with. And we found out there was some good barnwood that was underneath some tin at a farm just a half mile away from the pageant site. And started pulling nails off, laid the tin out real nice and everything. And the wood underneath it was good. We used it for a number of things during the pageant. I thought, hey, this tin is worth some money and for somebody. And sure enough, it was, because we got back there a day or two later and the tin was all gone. And I thought, really? The first year he was in it, if he played Mr. Kennedy. Probably the big highlight with my dad was putting the cross on the steeple. And I think that's what we as a family fondly remember that. Mom was always a little bit nervous as he got older, having him go up there and do that. And the crowd, that was a crowd favorite too, I think, Yeah, it was real special, that's for sure, really special. And Mom finally joined the cast, and then, that was even more special because, they were both in it, and he just was very devoted to the pageant. I think after he saw what this was going to become, he stepped forward, and of course he and Augie were good friends all from high school on and everything. So I was always really impressed to the fact that, I really didn't know him and didn't know what the connection was and how devoted he was too.
Now, you worked with Augie and you worked with Al then, too.
I did.
And since they're already passed on to the great theater in the sky.
Tremendous guys, and so enthused about the show. So willing to put themselves out there. And I don't know the exact story, but something about a personal loan at the bank to get this thing off the first time, and then, going out to the site and building the set out there, and huge risk for everybody involved, and but full steam ahead. I actually did tech one year, and I was up in the booth with Augie, and he was in charge. It was his baby, and Al was but he was backstage with the same attitude, and I played Mrs. Kennedy opposite his Mr. Kennedy for a long time, and that was great fun. And then watching him climb the bell tower, which we all remember, and just being scared to death that he was going to fall. So he was with us for a long, long time. He did the show a long time. Yeah, we called him Big John, kind of a John Wayne thing. Now, Augie's wife then, I believe, ran the box office initially. Just a real light. Yeah. He and his wife both gave so much to it. And a lot of husband and wife teams out there.
There are times when I sense Augie and Al, along with James Merchant, standing on this stage's dugout, not looking down, but looking up and still dreaming about what next great thing we can share. Truly, Laura's story and the Wilder pageant story are journeys of struggle with nature and self and others. This story succeeds because it is rooted in faith, family, and friends. This activity is made possible in part by the voters of Minnesota through a grant from the Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Other major contributors include the Robert and Helen Remick Charitable Foundation Trust and the Walnut Grove Area Foundation.